over time, everyone else's expectations of you it becomes what you think you should do. It becomes what you think you want to do. But that will never replace what you truly want to do. And I think that was a realization I had 6 months into my corporate role. I realized that this is not what I imagined it to be at all. Like I work in a nice glamoury building, but this is not what I wanted. It's also not the best use of what I have to offer.
Sherry, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so grateful. I'm so honored. I absolutely love your writing. I'm shocked that this is the first podcast you've ever recorded, and I'm honored that you are here today. So thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you for giving me this platform and, being my first podcast experience.
So let's start with the book, The Pluri Society. First of all, what is the Pluri Society, and where and when did this idea come to be?
Well, a short answer, I just think it sounds edgy. Like, I just think it sounds cool and creative. Yeah, I didn't think too deeply about it. I will say that the word pluri is sort of aligned with the rest of the stuff I write online. So, for example, my Substack, which is where I first started writing more seriously and more longer pieces, it's called pluripotent. And pluri in Latin, which you see in a lot of English words like plural, it just means to have many, to be full of potential, to be something before you become something else. I think that kind of encapsulates the gist of what I'm trying to write about, which is you embrace yourself as being someone who is capable of becoming something above who you are right now. You're not just a being, you're also becoming. So what are you going to do with that? What are you going to do with this time? What are you going to do with who you are and what you have?
That seems like a deep thing to think about, and it's a very mature thing to think about. What age, like when did you start thinking in those terms?
Don't know. Not sure. I will say a lot of this was inspired by Viktor Frankl and a lot of his studies on, I believe he actually founded the school of logotherapy, which is therapy surrounding meaning, logos and Greek meaning. And logotherapy is basically about, well, if you have something above yourself, something transcendent, something you look forward to and something you want to be that's bigger than yourself, you will always have a purpose. You will have a reason for doing everything you do. And I think that is the one thing that if you were to have one set of belief or something to stand on, that is what you should stand on.
And for you, what do you feel like at this point in your life? What is your purpose? What are you here to do?
Oh, that's a really tough question. Wow. No one's actually ever asked me that that directly before. I would say in this season of my life, as a writer, as a spreader of ideas, whatever, I would say my purpose is to spread good ideas. I think that you've probably heard this so many times on your podcast, but everyone loves talking about how the internet is the age of abundance. But I think just like food and just like, your diet and what you put into your body, there is such thing as junk diet, like junk information diet. Like just because there is more does not mean there is better. I think the one thing I can do is to put more good ideas out there, and helping people consume selectively. That was something I talked about I don't remember if it was a Substack or in the comments of one of them, but I think selective consumption is something I'm very passionate about talking about.
So how do you go about doing that? You see so much coming at you in any given day, whether that's tweets or Instagram posts or YouTube videos or just like going onto any website. You're going to consume stuff. How do you decide selectively which things that are worth your attention versus which things aren't?
I'll be honest, I don't always scroll. I just go outside. I like taking walks instead. I enjoy being under the sun more than just looking at post after post, video after video. Um, I think that the classics have more value than most of the stuff on the internet right now. And maybe this is a little ironic because I'm a contemporary writer. Like, am I saying that people shouldn't read my stuff or listen to me? Well, I don't know what to say about that, but the point is, classic, I think it's called the Lindy effect, but things that last for a long time, there's a reason why they last for a long time. And there are some books that I'll never get tired of reading them. Like Man's Search for Meaning is one of them. Paul Tillich's Courage to Be is another one. But there's endless wisdom. If you can read one sentence and interpret it so many ways. I also think that the author matters. So one of the reasons why Viktor Frankl is so well received is because he talks about his personal experience with surviving the Holocaust and how, his will to purpose, his how the people that were alongside him in the camps, it was those that imagined a better life outside of the camps. It was, you can call it delusion, but it was pure imagination and pure hope. It was hope that really pulled them out of the terrible situation. And that's very significant.
Yeah, and it's like I'll read through the book and read through your writing, and for some reason I do feel hope and an ability to change, ability to move my perspective and to create a better future for myself. And I think that's some of the power in your writing, and that's why I'm so drawn to it, at least, is like I feel as if from reading it I can create a better reality for myself.
Wow, that's great.
So
Yeah,
what have
that feels great. Nothing feels better than hearing that from someone who someone who reads your stuff and they say that, wow, you really inspired me or something really clicked.
yeah.
Also, onto that, I will say that I recently learned that the word for rope in Hebrew is tikva, something like that, something like tikva. But in the Hebrew language, tikva means two things. It means hope and rope. And I found it really interesting how in the Bible, there's a lot of stories where characters are rescued by rope. Like, for example, when Joseph gets pulled out of the pit, someone offers him a rope and he gets out of the pit. Yeah, I think there's a cool, there's a significant use of language there.
As in a rope leads to a greater future, where if you like put a rope down a ladder or something, you can like use the rope to look up, to be better in some way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you're stranded somewhere, if someone offers you a rope, that is a sign of rescue. That's a sign of help. That's a sign of, hey, you're there, I'm here. I want you to be where I am. Let me help you get over here. And I think in a way that is what writing online or writing in general does. It's about throwing a rope to people and saying, hey, I'm here. This is what I see. And I see what you're struggling with. Grab onto this rope. Let me pull you over here.
So what happened with you in writing online? You told me 6 months ago you started putting your thoughts out on the internet. That's pretty wild to go from that to 75,000 people following your work. One, how did that happen? And two, what gave you the inclination to start?
What gave me the inclination to start? Well, I'll tackle that one because that one's easier. I was in a bar with a few friends in New York and they had Twitter and I had a Twitter at the time, right? But I only used it for like just, stalking, like looking at, politics, news, whatever. And it wasn't Schrodinger's brat at the time either. It was just like some random like string of letters. And they were like, hey, you should get on Twitter. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. I'll just start posting. And at first it was just silly stuff. But I don't know. I just sort of, I guess that's what they call teapot, like this part of Twitter, right? Like when the algo puts you like with a certain group of people. And I found that to be really funny. Like it was just funny. But with Substack, I think it was around September or October last year. I started a Substack because I thought it was just a hip new thing. Like, people were writing online and people weren't using LinkedIn or Medium anymore. So I just tried it out for fun. Yeah. And I guess I had a few bangers or I would say the first few were pretty controversial. That's why they went viral. But the result is the result. I guess people follow. Yeah.
What was the first moment something felt different, or like there was way more eyeballs on you than with just your friends? Like I assume how it was when it started.
Oh, well, my first viral tweet, it was the one about girls should bring up astrology on the first date. I don't even remember how the tweet goes word for word, but it's something. The idea of it was that girls should bring up astrology on the first date because astrology is very controversial for in its own ways, right? Like people think it's like you're believing these woo-woo systems, or and some people are like, oh, I just take it for fun, but fun is still fun. It's basically a litmus test. It's like if you say something really stupid or something really frivolous when you're meeting someone new, how they react to that is more important than what the thing actually is. In psychology, there's a thing called I believe it's called bidding. The concept is called bidding, which is how seriously do you take the things that your partner takes seriously? So for example, I think the study went like there were these two groups of newlywed couples, and they would trace their behaviors on their honeymoon and whatever. And the couple that listened very attentively to everything that their partner said, those couples lasted a lot longer than the ones who would roll their eyes, brush it off, say, oh, that's stupid, I don't want to listen to it. So bidding is basically like if your partner says, hey, that bird is pretty cool, and you're not interested in birds, and that bird is like the boringest bird you've ever seen, you have to speak like, oh, you're right, or hey, let me at least pay attention to what you're saying and care about what you care about. But yeah, it was super stupid. It's like some astrology tweet. And I actually didn't know it went that viral until I was seeing screenshots of like people on TikTok or like Instagram reel, like taking a screenshot and then talking about me. Some of it was not like positive comments, but still like to be talked about, bad publicity, whatever, I don't care. But the point is that was like the one moment where I was like, the internet is too scary. I don't know what to do with this.
So how come at that point you didn't just say, all right, like I don't want to write anymore online, like these people are talking about me, like something pushed you beyond that and kept writing? Why?
I guess I just wanted to. It sounds very simple, but it was, I think, figuring out what I want, and even the word to want has been one of the biggest revelation I had in the past 6 months. So I graduated from college last year. I worked very briefly in corporate. Had like an existential sort of like, what am I doing here? Like not in the office here, like what am I doing here? Like in the grand scheme, what am I doing here? And one of the big lessons I learned was, well, what you want, do not confuse what you truly want with what you think you ought to do. So I feel like a lot of my audience really, they really relate to this, which is, I would say I'm one of those students that, did typically well in college, tried to get good grades, recruited at some good firms, whatnot. And so there's been this pressure, or at least this social expectation that, hey, if Sherry is smart, she gets good grades, therefore she should go work at McKinsey, or like, whatever. She should go work at McKinsey. She should be in investment banking. And I think over time, it really grows on people. It really grows on you that if all of my friends are in, stock trading clubs, if all of my friends are in these smarty pants activities and they're all gunning for these positions, then I should be too. If my parents think that, hey, you're going to this college for this program, then you should be doing this after college. So over time, everyone else's expectations of you becomes what you think you should do. It becomes what you think you want to do. But that will never replace what you truly want to do. And I think that was a realization I had 6 months into my corporate role. I realized that this is not what I imagined it to be at all. Like I work in a nice glamoury building, but this is not what I wanted. It's also not the best use of what I have to offer. There's a book called Man's Search for Himself by Rollo May. And there's a quote in there where he says, he was quoting one of his clients. He's a psychotherapist, and one of his clients said, well, I'm just a collection of mirrors reflecting what everyone else thinks of me. And that's how I feel a lot of the times. So I think figuring out what you truly want is a lot more difficult than what it sounds like. It's easier when you're a child. Children, they want things. Like, you say, I want things like a child. Or you say someone who wants things like a child, what does it mean? Well, it means they're very straightforward. What they want is what they want. They're not complicated. They know exactly what this is going to do for them. Maybe it's for pleasure. Maybe it tastes good. It's for fun. But either way, they're very clear, and their vision is very unblurred by the social expectations, mimetic desires. I think that's something we ought to preserve as we age. Sure, we have greater impulse controls and all that, but at the same time, we shouldn't lose sight of what is it that we truly want.
How do we preserve that?
I think the easiest way is to first figure out what you don't want. It's easier for people to answer that, right? Because it's like, well, what do you don't want? I don't want to be sick. I don't want debt. I don't want great tragedy. I don't want hell to break loose. And then, well, if you dig a little deeper, the question becomes, why are you afraid to want? Or why are you afraid to admit what you want? Because when you define what you want, you're basically telling yourself, this is now what I think of as successful. And so when you clearly say that and you don't get there, that means you're telling yourself, well, if A is what's successful, then B, C, D, E, F is everything that I consider not successful. So for many people, it's easier to live in this state of like, I'm full of potential. I could become something, but I'm never going to outline what it is I actually want. I'm never going to tell you what I actually want to become. I'm just proud of being like, I'm full of creativity. I'm full of potential. So I think being pluripotent or pluri is the first step of that. The second step is to have the courage to actually be that thing, to do what you want.
So you quit your job working in a fancy office, I'm guessing, as corporate individual. And then you said you went through like a little bit of an existential crisis. And then I'm guessing your next step was figuring out what you wanted to want and creating a way of getting there, of figuring that out. How do you go about doing that? And what it is today that you want to want?
I'd say I'm still in that journey right now. I don't think I've figured it out. I will say I'm pretty lucky because about a month and a half into this whole writing online, figuring things out, I got in touch with David Perel, who runs Rite of Passage, the writing school, and he was looking for someone to. He's amazing. The school is the best. Rite of Passage is probably the best writing course online. The team is amazing as well. Oh, I just spoiled it. So anyway, I got in touch with David Pearl, and he asked me. He was telling me about like he was looking for someone to write their newsletter. Just kind of create content. Reaching out via email, Twitter to give Rite of Passage a smart voice, a intellectual, fun to listen to voice. So I thought, why not? So I was writing the Rite of Passage newsletter for a little while. I took a break in the middle, but I'm back now, actually. So that's what I'm doing. So I guess I'm just... I will say that it took me a while to get comfortable telling people that I'm a writer when they ask me what I do. Because...
Why is that?
Well, I think writing for most people is not something you do as a profession. It's like cooking. Everyone likes to cook. Not everyone's a chef. Not everyone works in a restaurant. Everyone can journal, but not everyone actually just like makes reading and writing their bread and butter of their 24 hours. But I think writing online, like holding myself accountable for posting things regularly, as well as writing for Rite of Passage, has really solidified this. I am actually spending like 5-6 hours a day writing. How am I not a writer? That actually hit me the other day, and I was thinking, wow, I'm actually a writer now. Like, I've actually become the thing I wanted to do. That's kind of crazy. But to answer your first question, I can't say for 100% I know what I want to do for sure. I will say that what I'm doing right now is what I wanted 6 months ago.
That is interesting. That you could 6 months ago you could have wanted to be something or do something, and then you could do it, and then you could still not be sure that that is actually what you really want. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah,
You follow?
yeah. Well, I guess in a broader sense, I'm sure that I want a family of my own one day. I would like to have kids of my own one day. Um, yeah, these broad things, but I think a lot of people would, a lot of people have these down the line sort of. I imagine what my life would be like. But the thing is, we don't. I think. So I think this is what you're getting at, and my answer to that is, it's scary how fast things can change in 6 months because, you can think about, oh yeah, I'm gonna get married one day. I'm gonna live here and have kids one day. But then it sounds like it's a long time. It sounds like it's far away, but days become weeks and weeks become months, and before you know it, you're actually there. Like 6 months ago, would I have thought that this is exactly what I'm doing, that I would be on Danny Miranda's podcast talking about my book and everything? No, I don't think it would have been that specific, but the days really did compound. And the things I write about now are things I read about or I thought about months ago. So, and one of the things I like to say a lot is, in 10 years, you want to live the life where you can say, this is what I wanted, and not, this is what I settled for.
Yeah.
Because time really creeps up on you. I think that's the thing I learned in my ripe age of 23 years. Yeah.
The craziest thing, you being 23. Well, speaking about consistency and compounding, you said on January 11th, wow, maybe there's no secret sauce to quote unquote making it. It really is just the power of consistency and compounding. Do something well and do it over and over again. And if you know that to be true, then it's like, why wouldn't you choose something that you inherently would do for play, right?
Okay. So I'm a big fan of Steve Jobs. I would say a lot of my philosophy when it comes to greatness, and by I don't mean like a glorious celebrity Hollywood sort of greatness, but greatness as in almost like in a Nietzsche sort of, the power to become a greater sense of, to be a greater version of yourself, that kind of greatness. I think a lot of my philosophy around greatness really comes from Steve Jobs. And well, it was in one of his interviews, people asked him like, I think it was like, what's your marketing technique? Like, how do you sell things so well? He's like, just build a great product. Like, if you don't have a great product, why would people want it? Why would people want to use it or buy it? And it's really as simple as that. Like, you want good things, you don't want bad things. You want good products, you don't want bad products. It's so simple yet overlooked because everyone thinks that, now, of course, marketing is important, but everyone thinks that, it's about the packaging, it's about how we sell it. We forget that there is such thing as capital T truth. And at the core of everything, there's going to be a truth. And the truth is going to be, is it good or is it not? I think this product can also be a metaphor for other things. For example, you are a product. I'm a product. People are a product. I think that if you are a good product, if you're good at just being you, which is the thing you do naturally, you are going to draw the people that enjoy who you are naturally. Be yourself and everyone else will adjust to that.
So on that point, on creating, you've written before that creating/writing comes out of the way I sweat during a workout. I don't try to sweat at the gym. Sweating happens. It's a side effect. Just by existing, you are technically creating quote unquote content. For example, your text messages to friends. Just by living, you are self-expressing. To be is to self-express. To exist is to self-express. Life, therefore, is just a process of self-expressing and content creating. You don't need blueprints, techniques, strategies, because You are your blueprints, techniques, and strategies. You are not just the creator, you are the content. True content is not created. It is who the creator is. It's their identity, their fingerprint on the world. If you find yourself squeezing something out for the sake of producing something, that is trying. It is no longer content, but an engagement puppet. True content is wholehearted and authentic self-expression. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really inspired by Dostoevsky. He said, how can you live with no story to tell? So I'm going to use that as a starting point because I think we tend to think that the world is divided into famous people and not famous people. You know, you're either someone of importance, you're either a somebody, or you're just a normal person, like a non-playing character. You know, like you're either someone or you're not someone. But I think everyone can be the focus of their own story. Everyone is the main character, as cliche as it sounds, but everyone is the main character in their own story. And you think that, you know, creativity is something reserved for artists. You know, it's an adjective to describe people who just like have a lot of colorful ideas. But no, creativity is just the urge to put something out there in the world that can possibly outlive you. It's just the I wrote about this, about the myth of Adam in Genesis versus Prometheus in the Greek myth. And I talked about how they're very similar, but the one key difference between them is that the myth of Prometheus teaches us that he dared to do something that he knew was dangerous, but he brought fire against the mortals. And fire is very significant because fire is what it was really the beginning of what created all of our technologies in a very medieval sense. Fire allowed us to cook meat. I mean, I do think controlled fire, like not from a lightning, but something that you can create and like, you know, mold wherever you want. I do think that is one of the first technologies that we've ever invented to be able to cook meat so it's more digestible, to be able to sustain the light from day into the night. We no longer have to rely on sunlight. So fire is it's very significant. And to think that mythologically there was this this figure that was willing to, you know, risk great punishment to do that is essentially the human spirit of taking risks to do something to better his own condition, to take a risk to improve what you currently have. Because if you just stay at where you currently are, sure, your life won't get better, but you're not doing anything dangerous. The more risk you take, the more chances of something great coming back to you.
That relates to number 66 from your book, which is strive to win. Are you aiming for the best or just good enough? You need to want to win. Participation trophy culture discourages excellence. Outcomes don't matter. Just enjoy the journey. But being hungry for victory is a birthright. Ambition is morally virtuous. You should want the best for yourself. It's beautiful. And it's so true. Like, I think that for a long period of time, I felt as if just existing was the win in and of itself. And although that is true, if you are given that opportunity to play in this game of life, why not strive to be the best you very can be? And so it's an interesting shift personally that I'm noticing within myself, and you writing it here just really hit at the right time.
Yeah, I do want to make clear that I think the word power is very easily misinterpreted. I don't mean power in the sense of politics, social power, manipulation, or coercion. I think power has more to do with, again, back to Nietzsche, power has more to do with expanding yourself to become better than the person you were yesterday, to overcome a past self. Because, well, let's say that, you're not improving, you're not striving to win. The alternative to that, this alternative is, while you're sitting there and you're thinking about the things you can be, but you're not doing so. And I think that's the truth you can't escape from. You can't lie to yourself. If you try your best and you don't win, well, that's a different story. Even losing will feel good because it's on your own account. But if you never tried, deep down in your heart, even if you can lie to the rest of the world about how hard you tried, in your heart, you know you didn't try hard enough.
Is that something you've struggled with in the past?
Yeah, and I would say everyone has. I think not trying hard enough, and the feeling of this feeling of shame, especially when you're a really high achiever, this feeling of shame and like knowing deep in your heart that you didn't do all you can. I think it's a very common feeling.
Yeah. I'd love for you to explain number 40 from the book, which is, if your mind needs nourishment, read, cardio, write, resistance training, debate, clarity, meditate, relaxation, exercise, rest, sleep, comfort, pray. The one that I didn't understand, or the two that didn't really click for me, were cardio, right, and resistance training, debate. So if your mind needs cardio, right. If your mind needs resistance training, debate. Could you explain exactly what you meant there?
Yeah, I came up with that one in the shower. Um, I don't know. I mean, well, I think debate is a lot like resistance, because the point of debate is to put your beliefs to test, is to see how your beliefs measure up against someone else's beliefs and how well you can defend yours against theirs. And resistance training is important because, when you go to the gym and you work out, if you want to build a muscle, you essentially have to destroy it first. Like that's literally how you build something. It's kind of it sounds very poetic and beautiful, but if you want to create, you have to destroy it first. That is how we build muscle, and I think ideas are the same, or beliefs are the same. When people are in debate, or even like a casual argument, if people dig deep down far enough into their position and what they're debating for, it boils down to the question of like, why does this matter to me? Why is this important to me? And then we get into the questions of, well, what is your core belief? And your core belief is basically what holds you up alive in this world. I like to use the analogy of a raft, a life raft of, if let's say it's made of like many wooden planks, kind of laid next to each other, and that's the raft that you need to stay afloat, to not fall into the ocean. And every single wooden plank on that raft is a core belief. You have to stand on your core beliefs in order to stay afloat. There isn't a single person who doesn't have a core belief. It's a very absurd to think about, because not even the idea of saying I don't have a belief, that is a belief. So I think core beliefs is, so the reason why I think debate is like resistance is because you have to meet someone who is equally powerful, or equal in strength of the push and pull you're doing. Because debate is essentially you trying to destroy the other person's raft. And if you want a stronger raft, you have to risk it having like some of these planks be destroyed, or seriously thought about, why I have this plank on my ship. Why do I have this here? Do I need to change it? Do I need to, polish it or in some way? So I think resistance it's very important. Yeah.
That's really cool. And what about cardio, right?
Oh, it just feels like cardio for me. I think like the same as running. Yeah.
Really? Wow. In what sense?
I don't know, really. It's just like a flow of ideas, like a never ending one step after the other, one word after the other. It just goes on. Yeah.
I recently started running and I'm like, this sucks. Like, I don't want to continue.
Really?
And I know it feels like resistance to me. But to you, cardio or running feels like the flow of the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And actually, or maybe this is why I got that idea, but I actually do a lot of my thinking on the treadmill. In college, I used to write entire, like, if I had a paper due, I would just go for a run and like I would just think of the things I would write while running. And I think I actually find cardio quite easy because all I do is I just put on my AirPods, listen to some music, and before you know it, I've done like 3 miles or something. Yeah, so I guess I do thinking running at the same time. Maybe that's why.
And you run at a pace that is like challenging or a pace that's easy for you? Like, how do you run?
Um, I don't know the exact terms for this, but I believe zone 2 cardio is when like you can still talk to someone.
Mm-hmm.
So I would run faster than that. Yeah, so I typically run faster than zone 2. More than I wouldn't be able to talk to someone next to me. Yeah.
Gotcha. So that makes a lot of sense. I'd love to go to number 20, which is, if you don't know what you want, the world will tell you, and you will spend your life chasing meaningless desires that have no value other than what the herd says it is worth. This kind of relates to what we were talking about before with chasing the things that other people think are interesting or insightful rather than the things that you think are interesting or insightful. But I didn't realize how much in the past my desires were based on other people's desires because I had not spent any time looking at myself or spending time with myself. What do you do to help the voice of the internal truth come out more?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say solitude, which I do very frequently without intention. I'm very introverted. I enjoy spending a lot of time by myself. Yeah, I don't think I've actually. I think when I was in college, it was harder to do that because you're constantly surrounded by people your own age, and everyone's just as confused about like what you want to do after college. And these companies, they advertise like crazy. Like they come to your campus and they tell you about like the perks of working here, working there. And then once your friends get on LinkedIn, I think that becomes even, it becomes even more in your face. Like people talk about, I'm so humbled and honored to start working here. And then you imagine yourself, oh my, like what a great company. Maybe I should start looking into that further, or maybe I should start working in that industry. But I actually think coming out of college was a great blessing because in the real world, as if college wasn't real, in the real world, you start realizing that actually there are infinite number of things you can do. There are infinite paths you can do. Like, I know like Elon Musk is pretty amazing. People know that he like built rockets and, electric vehicles. But a lot of the really wealthy people, they're not doing glamorous things like building rockets. They're supplying like tissue boxes for like all the stores in this one area, whatever. Maybe that's what they made their wealth from. Maybe, you can make one software and sell a patent, and that could be, your life's worth of all the money you ever need. Like all to say that there's so many paths to making money, becoming famous, whatever it is that you once thought as a teenager was so glamorous and was so superstar, rock star about XYZ celebrity, that once you're actually on this path of like doing your own thing, you realize I have just as much agency as they once had. And I have the same amount of I have the same 24 hours in a day. I have, the same level of access to these things. So what's the difference between me and this person that I looked up to? I think meeting your heroes is a really humbling experience, because you realize that they're not that different from you. They wake up, they eat, 2 to 3 meals a day, they sleep, and they just do something that they're interested in. And yeah, I guess for me, I can get very uncomfortable if I'm asked to do something that I know is wrong, or I know I don't like, at least. I would say listen to your guts. And I mean literal guts. Like, your literal body will feel weird if you do something you don't like. So for example, when I was working in corporate, I had terrible appetite. I was very bloated. I couldn't sleep. You have physiological things that tell you when something's wrong. I'm sure that's not the only story about, people who come out of investment banking with hair loss and whatever. So I would say listen to your literal guts, listen to your body.
Yeah, it can be so difficult. It feels like when you're surrounded by so many people who some are friends, some are people you look up to as friends, and you're constantly surrounded by that. In college, that was the case for me as well. But I'm curious, for a college student listening to this right now who is using this podcast as a way to remove themselves from the noise of college, what would you tell them to do? Listen to their gut, spend time by themselves. Is there anything else that comes to mind?
So now I'm imagining if I'm just talking to my college self. Try new things. Do the most unexpected, join a club that you would think is the most unexpected. Like in first year, I joined a fashion club, and I literally made clothes. I made clothes for a show at the end of the year. Do something you've never done before and see what happens, because only novelty can really test how you fare in a difficult situation. How do you react to dealing with maybe a personality you've never met? Maybe, all your friends are one kind, but this person is maybe they're super religious or super, super fanatical about something. How do you deal with different people? That's a really big one, because dealing with people is, I think, social, the ability to communicate and keep relationships going is a huge make or break in real life. I think that's something that we don't teach in college enough. And they just kind of throw you into the real world and, go get a job and go socialize there. But yeah, I'll just say try something new and just surprise yourself. Try a new sport, a new art form. Sounds weird, but just go chat up the one student sitting in the lecture hall that you see all the time. I have a few friends that I've made like that. It's very serendipitous, but I still keep in touch with some of those people.
What do? You just went up to someone and said what exactly?
Hey, are you also majoring in psychology? Or, why are you taking this class? Or, hey, that's a nice tote bag. That's a nice laptop case. Just sit next to them. Yeah.
You mentioned before about meeting your heroes and how that can be a very helpful thing. That's what I've figured out from doing this podcast as well, is my heroes are just people and they're human beings. I'm curious, how has meeting your heroes been, in the sense of what you learn, what was different than your expectations, and any particularly insightful stories?
Well, the first thing I would do is I see if they sound like their podcast. I want to see if this famous person sounds like what they sound like in interviews, or is it all just a facade? That's always interesting. I would say the most insightful thing I get from meeting my heroes is that I get to have a conversation with them, because oftentimes when you're just listening to lectures on YouTube, or podcast they've been on, you're listening to them rant like you're listening to me right now. You just listen to them talk about things. You don't get to interact with them. But when you see them, you get to ask them questions, and then they talk back to you, like they give you an answer about like what they think, and that is very valuable to me, because it feels like I'm connecting with this one thing that's been living in my imagination that's never been real, and now it's real.
I would love to go to number 65, which is watch your thoughts. They show on your face. Nature gives you your face at 20, but the face you have at 40 is the one you deserve. That's powerful.
Yeah, that's when I discovered physiognomy from First Principles. I was just thinking, like, you make expressions so unconsciously, right? Like, you can't, like, sometimes when I'm riding the train, for example, I just like look at people, in not a creepy way, but I just like look at people, and like people are always on their phones, right? And you can tell when they see something funny because they just start laughing, like they start smiling. But like if you were to explain that to like a animal, right? That's kind of like, why would this person be smiling at a screen? Like, why is this person smiling at a device? It's because a lot of things, most of our experiences happen in our own head. Like, we make up these things about how our day went, how we felt during the day, when it could have been the most uneventful day. You could have sat at home all day, yet your imagination could have been running wild. I think 90% happens in our brain and 10% actually happens in reality. So a lot of the expressions and a lot of things that kind of come out on the surface is what you're thinking about behind the scenes. And it's just physics. After that, it's just physics. If you smile a lot, the muscles that are around your lips will be formed a certain way.
So someone hears that. What should they do about it?
I would say the biggest one is just don't scowl, because like the lines around your eyebrows, like those are the ones that really make you look like you age. Yeah, so just don't scowl.
In terms of thoughts to think, do you have specific affirmations you say to yourself often, or things that you repeat to yourself?
I tell myself it's going to be okay. Or I say this a lot. I do tell myself it do be like that sometimes. Just do be like that.
Is that a way to be at peace with what is?
Yes, I think partially through humor, because like it do be like that is such a big meme, like in Gen Z, right? It's like whatever happens, like, oh, it just do be like that. Like therapy is $500 an hour. Saying it do be like that is free. But I think it do be like that is one of those like midwit curves, right? Like where on both ends you have people who are just like, yeah, it is what it is. But like it really is just what it is, right? Like if this is reality and this is like what's already happened, you can't cry over the spilt milk. It's not like, you can't reverse what already happened in the past. You just have to take things as is. Like this is what's already happened, and do be like that. I don't know if that counts as an affirmation, but that is definitely how I think sometimes. Most of the times.
What do you think the difference is between a 22-year-old today and a 30-year-old today? And the reason why I ask this question is because I would imagine that in 1950, the difference between a 22 and a 30-year-old would not be as different as it is today. And even like the further back you go, the more the ages are similar. Like I saw something on Twitter about how the founding fathers ranged from like 18 to 30. I could not imagine an 18-year-old talking to a 30-year-old about founding a country today. And that is, I don't know exactly why. Maybe they're just like, maybe that's my own bias of being different in mind. But what do you think the difference is between the average 22-year-old and the average 30-year-old today?
Well, at first I was gonna say that a 22-year-old has never been to a Blockbuster. I think now a 30-year-old probably has. Well, I was gonna, huh? I will say that the younger tail of Gen Z is getting less. Um, they're getting less responsibilities. Like, for example, and maybe this is only culturally relevant. For example, if you go to if you go to Europe or parts of Asia today, like you will still see, for example, if you go to like a little ice cream stand, you will still see the kids helping out their parents with the job of running the store, or they're part of the business. They're doing what the adults are already doing, maybe at a lower level. Maybe they're not tall and they can't reach the shelves, but they're already part of that life. They're not taken away, put into this institution for 7-8 hours a day, and they're not doing something totally different. Education is definitely important, but I do think it's a little strange to be totally removed, to be kind of in a little egg, like a little hatchery of, I'm only going to do math, language, and science, and I'm not going to learn about how to negotiate with a person on a price of something. I'm not going to learn how to apologize to someone I've hurt, or these other things. And again, the reason why we don't teach those in school is because they aren't lessons that you can just have a sit down, read a textbook about it. They come from experience. They come from these real world things, such as helping your parents run a convenience store, or helping your parents run a noodle shop. I don't know, for example. I think there is a separation of children being away from just doing normal things. I think that I don't know if they're curious about it. Maybe they're curious about what's outside of school, like what goes on in other places. But yeah, the founding father fact that's really cool. Yeah, that's amazing.
It strikes me, what's interesting is that you're 23, but the things that you've written they appear as if like you're much, much older. And I'm curious if there's any experiences you feel like are a reason for that, or can help explain why it feels like you have a lot of wisdom.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been asked this question before. I don't know if this is the answer, but I will say that I lost my father to cancer when I was 19. And there is some truth to the saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Or all to say, when you have difficulties, when you face challenges, if those challenges do not defeat you, you defeat the challenge. And by virtue of defeating a challenge, back to Nietzsche, full circle, you become a more powerful, a greater version of yourself. But also maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm just more inclined to think about these questions and these thoughts. I did like start reading Nietzsche, or I learned about Nietzsche in high school, not through class, just like through my own time.
So how did that affect you? 19 years old, losing your father. Like, what was that experience like?
I think that experience turned me from a jolly young girl to a thoughtful young woman. I would say that was it's one of those things where, like, no matter how you try to package it or say it, it's tragic. Like, there's no, it doesn't matter how you try to tell someone about it, or tell the story without it being like a natural kind of knee-jerk reaction of, wow, that's terrible, and I would never wish that to happen on anyone. But I would say one of the biggest realizations that came to me, I wouldn't even say I came up with this, but it sort of happened, is that you viscerally realize how short life is. We like to say, oh, life is only 4,000 weeks, that book, right? The 4,000 weeks. Life is so short, make every day count. But people say that without realizing, no, you actually have to make every day count, because every day does count. Back to the tweet about there is no secret sauce to making it. It's because every second up to the point where you realize, wow, I've made it, every second of that counted. Every day accumulates to something. So I think learning or realizing that how short life really is, it made me take things into a new perspective. And this sounds kind of paradoxical, but it made me take life more seriously and less seriously at the same time. More seriously because it made me realize, wow, like I'm in charge of my own health. I have to take care of myself very well if I want to, to be still going out for walks and runs when I'm, well into my 60s and 70s. But also it taught me to take things less seriously. Like, I would say after that, I became a lot less anxious about a lot of things. Like, it do be like that, like if something happens, you're like, oh, well, this is what it is. It's kind of like, the meme of the two kids sitting on the bus, and one's facing the cliff and one's facing the sunset. And it's supposed to like contrast something that's like terrible and something that's great. It's you can caption it with, we all die, which is like pretty tragic. But at the same time, oh, we all die. It's like, oh, this doesn't really matter. Like at the end of the day, like, is it, for example, I used to freak out if I didn't, do well on this exam in college. But now looking back, I'm like, I don't care. I don't even remember what that class was on. I don't care about it anymore. So because I'm able to viscerally understand how short life is, I can then think about what I'm doing right now and extrapolate that into the future. Would 60-year-old me care about this one silly thing I said on my first podcast that the world is going to see? Maybe right now.
Probably going to be thinking about it every second for the rest of your life.
I mean, to be honest, before coming onto this podcast, I did have that thought. I was like, Danny has a really big platform. Like, people listen to his podcast. And what do I say? Like, what do I say? What do I not say? But then I thought, 20 years from now, Danny's probably on episode 500. I'm not going to, probably it's not going to matter that much to me anymore. I do think that folding up to something transcended, something above yourself. I mean, for me, that is faith, with a capital F. For me, like, faith is what I hold on to that I think is transcendent and above me, and that's definitely a very it makes you see that there is something beyond this world. There's something beyond material and substance. That there is truth and beauty and love are the two things that really connects you to the truth, to what is above you.
Yeah. On beauty, you mentioned your mother teaching you the importance of beauty, and her saying, or maybe you said, beauty is not a luxury, it is a necessity. And I thought that was like, whoa, like that hit me at some deep level, because I think in the modern world, we discount the importance of beauty. We say that, everything can be beautiful. And if you think everything can be beautiful, then it's like, well, in some sense, nothing is, because nothing is. So I think there's a really important point in highlighting beauty and taking note of it when beauty hits you. And I'd just love for you to talk a little bit more about beauty and its significance on your life.
Mm-hmm. I think beauty is another one of those things where you don't actively like go out and meet it. Beauty meets you. Beauty happens to you. For example, and I have a hunch that maybe you felt this feeling before, which is you stand in a cathedral or any kind of those old European buildings, and the feeling of like goosebumps, like literal physiological goosebumps, like the feeling of this thing that is so much bigger and so much grander than you, just overtaking you. It really brings people to tears. It really, it's like what is the economic value of something this grand? Like what words how can we use words to possibly describe this sort of feeling? And well, the reason why beauty gives us that feeling is because, well, beauty is beyond us. Beauty is terrifying, and it taunts us, because when we stare at it, beauty is everything you are not. That's why it's terrifying, because it shows you what you can be, but you're not. It's kind of inviting you to come try harder, become something better, try to be more like this. It's a direction, it's an aim, it's a goal, it's something to strive for. And in religion, we like to, people say that, God or deity, and this isn't just exclusive to the Christian faith, but in general, when it comes to deities, people like to say that God is the sum of all good things. God is whatever God is, the transcendent, a conscious being that is above you, is the accumulation of everything that is good. And beauty is the doorway to that. You know that you are in the presence of something bigger and beyond you when you stand in front of beauty. And I think in a way that is what the Disney movie Beauty and the Beast was supposed to be. Her name is Belle, which means beauty in French. And she becomes even more beautiful when she integrates with the Beast, which is this broken man who's trying to fix himself, who's trying to become better. And he does physically actually change appearance, and he becomes a very handsome prince at the end. But it's about beauty becoming even more beautiful when she is integrated with the person, the man who is trying to accept his aggressiveness, to accept his side of a beast, and to become a more better version of himself.
So that story, what does that illustrate and point us to do in our day-to-day lives?
Well, it means to treat beauty with greater importance, because it's not frivolous. Beauty is not the cherry on top. It should be what's considered when you create something or when you build something. What you do has to be meaningful to you before anyone else can look at it and say, hey, this is worth my time. I think if you didn't try your best to make something as beautiful as it can be, then I think you missed a huge opportunity to make this really significant.
Yeah, and circling back to Steve Jobs, it was like he would make the importance of the things that you couldn't even see in the laptop or the computers. He wanted those to be perfect as well, even though no one would see it. He'd want those to be beautiful. And similarly, David Perel, I stopped by his studio, and everything is laid out so beautifully. And he says it's very much on purpose. And I wonder if Steve Jobs had any impact on that. But there's a clear intentionality, and I feel myself respecting those products that those people create more because I know how much they value beauty. So I thought that was interesting and insightful, maybe.
I didn't know you've been to the studio.
Yes. David interviewed me on episode 306 or 305 of this podcast, and he's been a good friend for a long time.
Awesome.
I'd love to talk to you about, the bigger you realize, like, how small the internet actually is for people who are interested in ideas, in writing, in thoughtfulness. So it's cool. It's cool to realize, like, everything's connected.
But you're also, so that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, based in Austin. Love to talk to you about isolation, which Austin is definitely not isolated. And you had this great quote in Why Isolation is the Secret to Uniqueness, which is linked down below. And that is, Japan is without doubt one of the most popular tourist destinations. It is a deeply memorable place to visit because it's different. It's weird. It's quirky. It's beautiful, of course. But there are many things about Japan that are just unforgettably unique compared to the rest of the world. Why? Japan is an island, not just geographically, but also psychologically, culturally, and spiritually. And the more isolated something is, the more different it becomes. This hit me really deeply because a huge part of my life has been with meditation and going inward. And when I started doing this, I realized how different I was in some aspects and allowed me to lean into that differentness. And so it's interesting that a country could also exhibit the same characteristics by virtue of where it was located. So what made you realize this?
I was in Japan. I visited Japan for the first time in April. So that's where that came from. I was very shocked by the culture there, in a good way. In a good way. I think there's a part of me that really likes Japan. The part of me that's very orderly, very very quiet, very introverted, that really likes Japan. But yeah, there's no other place like Japan in the world. Like European countries are pretty much, like their borders literally a line on the ground. Like some of them are very non-distinct from one another. And the culture, the way that people sort of express themselves, quite similar depending on, how north or south you go in Europe. But like, I just don't think there's a single place that's similar to Japan or on the same wavelength. Like in Asia, in China, Korea, I think China and Korea are more like one another, and Singapore, they're more like one another than Japan. Japan's like a weird cousin. It's like the one that just stands out. It's different. Yeah. Yeah.
You said that...
thinking like, where do they come up with these things?
You said that part of you it appealed to, but part of you, I guess it didn't. What was that part that it didn't appeal to you?
I can see how Japan can quickly, in my imagination, it can quickly become a dystopia. For example, like the suicide rates are incredibly high in Japan, and sometimes on the train platform, it's so first of all, on the train platform, every single door where the doors are going to open, people line up and everyone's wearing the same suit. Everyone's, same posture. Their heads are like that. They're on their phone. And like, it's like cookie cut made people, cookie cut jobs, cookie cut routines. And sometimes you'll hear, the announcer saying, we're going to have a delay because of like a incident or like an obstruction. But like, everyone knows what really happened. Like, it's not uncommon for people to jump onto the tracks on Japanese train stations. So I do feel like Japan is dystopian in a sense, because it's kind of like they're so bubbly and cute and, animated on the front, but there's so much darkness going on behind. There's so much people who are, they're trapped in this life of going to work. And the salary in Japan for a white collar job is not that high compared to North America. And they're not making, a great living. There was less than 1 million babies born last year in Japan. So people aren't dating. They're not married. They don't have a life partner. I think there's lots of things that's, it could be quite depressing behind the scenes. So I would say that, as a foreigner and as someone who travels, it's cool to visit, but I have no idea what it's like to actually live there and be a resident.
It's so interesting because it's almost like the dark side of isolation, right? Like isolation can bring uniqueness and interestingness and new insights, but it can also, you spend too much time in isolation. That's the best way we currently know to imprison someone and to torture them. And so there's something really interesting there about how both are like, you need some isolation to get new ideas and to be different, but too much and you could go crazy. And that's not to insinuate that the reason why Japan is going through some of those struggles that you mentioned is because of isolation, but it could be an interesting storyline to draw through.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the telltale signs of especially for teenagers, that something is wrong, whether they're being bullied or they're having some very troubling thoughts, is if they're alone for too long. Isolation is the beginning of a lot of very, very dark stories. But I think in an age where, I think we're going full circle now, but in an age where there's too much information and it's actually harder to keep things out than let things in, I try to isolate more. I try harder for the first than the latter.
I'm so with you, and it's why my bio reads, "Go inward to find the truth," because in a world where everyone is consume information, listen to this podcast, watch this movie, it's like you need time to understand what you think, because otherwise you spend 50 years in the corporate job that you don't want to be in. And so I'm so grateful for you for spending the time here today, explaining some of these ideas. And for your first podcast ever, you made it look easy. So great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Danny.
I like to end these podcasts with a challenge. A challenge I ask of you to ask the audience to do something with the information that we've presented here today, or something that we haven't covered, to leave somebody with an action step of something that they should do to live a potentially better life. And I'm curious if a challenge comes to mind.
Challenge. Ooh. Yeah, here's a good challenge. I think so. The challenge I want to present the listeners of this episode is try to give up something you really like for a month, 2 weeks, a month. Well, there's a few reasons for that. Number one is when you get to go back to that, you realize how much privilege you had that you were not intentionally ungrateful for, but you didn't realize that you had it. So you had things so well for you. And another reason is just that I think inducing a little bit of self-imposed suffering, kind of like a marshmallow challenge, a little bit of waiting, a little bit of not getting what you want immediately. It just makes it feel better when you actually get it. It feels a lot more rewarding. I think the general challenge that a lot of people have today is that we greatly overvalue what we don't have and we undervalue what we already do. Sometimes you think about how something you have today was what you really, really wanted 3 years ago. I think especially at my age when in college you have a long wish list of things you wanted, but you don't actually get to buy them until you start, making your own money and, things get, it's kind of like that. It's like the things you have today, you don't even realize that this is what you wanted so badly that you would have saved all your allowance on as a child. And now you get it with such ease and you don't care about it anymore. And I think we can extrapolate that into the future, which is, well, what is something I have today that I'm taking for granted that I would kill to have when I am 20 years into the future? For a lot of people, that's health, right? Like I want the energy level I have today. I would never want to lose this. Well, then treat it with greater care. Take greater care of yourself. Make sure you have that energy in the future.
That is a very original challenge. I don't think of all the episodes that we've recorded so far that challenge has been given in any way. So I love it. I appreciate it so much. I appreciate your wisdom and energy so much. Like, this was an amazing episode. Go check out the Pluri Society as well as Schrodinger's Brat on Twitter. And is that correct? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
And what is your Substack so we can send people that way as well?
So the Substack is blog.theplurysociety, same title as the book.com.
Awesome. And anything else you'd like to plug or mention?
Oh yeah, I'm working on another book right now. I mean, I would say this is like my main thing. I'm writing a book called 7 Principles of Self-Stewardship. This one I've been working on since January. I started it in the beginning of this year. I'm planning to release it either December or early next year, like Q1 2024.
Wow. I'd love to have you back on when you release that book, because the first one was incredible.
Thank you. Yeah, let's make this happen again. Thank you, Danny.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. and spreading that energy and wisdom.